But yeah, that was a really fun event. I mean, the Thelma, just that venue's awesome, and then just seems like a really good group of people. We're getting more and more involved with Envision, and then young professionals in Fond du Lac, and Becca and Josh have done a great job of getting Will more involved with that organization, and just being at the event, just a really good vibe, good group of people, and congrats on the nomination.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I completely agree. It is a great event. Normally, I don't get to go to it because I play volleyball. I've played volleyball for the past 20 years on Thursday nights.
You're on the 4-night-a-week schedule?
No, just one night.
Okay.
Yeah. I like to keep a variety, but
Yep.
We won't go into that. But so this is the first event. So I actually requested a bye for that night, so my
nice.
team could come to watch us play or do the event. And so yeah, no, it was really cool to be there and see what all goes into it. And,
yeah.
It's all volunteer stuff.
I know.
I mean, it's just what, just the Megans alone do,
Yep.
and everyone else that's involved. The only two people that got paid there are Joe V and Crystal Decker. They're the only ones that actually get paid to do what they do. Everything else is.
And that's what you could sense is like, everybody's there for the right reasons.
Right.
And that, sometimes with events like that, that's not the vibe, but everybody
Right.
there is like, giving back to the community, wanting to grow professionally, but also, always giving back. So.
Right. Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't even realize too, so many of the businesses like Thelma, I'm sure, gave us a great deal
Yep.
for the venue. And, the flowers were probably donated by Hensey Floral or
Yep.
wherever they came from. And
The podcasting studio.
yeah, the podcasting studio was
Yep.
was all included. So yeah, I mean, it's just
Yep.
businesses such as you guys
For
that
sure.
really help and go along with the vibe. So
Well, man, how'd you get into real estate and home building?
Well,
what was that progression like?
It's I guess I'll start with from the beginning. So I grew up on a dairy farm, and I
There's
absolutely
a few people around here like that, right?
Yeah, I hated it. It was
Yep.
something that I did not want at all. I just looked at my parents, and it just seemed god awful. And
Yeah.
I had to do chores before I went to school, come home and do chores again, and you don't really make any money. And
Yeah.
the government sets your wage, and your product you're selling, so there's just no freedom to it at all. So we had some projects that we had done on the farm that were electricity related, and it always just kind of interested me as to how that worked. You can't see it. It's
Yep.
just the electrons flow, and then stuff, lights turn on. I mean, so it sparked an interest. So as soon as I could, I got an apprenticeship with Spec Electric, which is local in town here, and started doing that. And I'll never forget, in high school we had a guy from the local, I don't know, he's a construction guy, I forget what he was, some consultant or whatever. He's like, yeah, there's so much need for construction workers. If you get into that, you're going to have work for as long as you can remember. So I actually so got my apprenticeship, and then I actually bought a house right away. I bought a house at 19. I didn't want to rent, so I rented for 6 months and bought a house. And then I think 2 years later we had the recession, and then suddenly I'm down to work in short hours.
Yep.
So 32-hour weeks, still had the bills to pay, and so I had to get a second job. So I ended up getting a job working at Kohl's for.
So which recession was that?
So that would have been the beginning 2002 kind
Okay,
of
so
beginning.
the dot-com crash.
Exactly.
Yep. Okay.
Yep. So things just kind of slowed down.
Yep.
I remember getting a job at Kohl's for $6 an hour, unloading trucks. It was just awful, but you got to do what you got to do, right? And then my buddy mentioned real estate. I never considered real estate. I always liked the idea of being a landlord, but I never thought of myself as a salesperson,
Sure.
so to speak. So he's like, oh, you should do this. I'm like, I don't know. And then, after a couple years of things being slow, I'm like, well, I have nothing else to do. I'll, read the books and watch the videos. And so I got my license, which was the easy part. And the main reason was just to get into rental properties.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I wanted to do, which the timing couldn't have worked out better with, things and how they went. But, I got some really good deals in that regard, and, started buying. And I think about first one in 2006, which was Still a little bit. Things were still coming down. The first one I overpaid for by quite a bit. Still working on that one, but after that it worked out much better. But I came to find that I really enjoyed helping people go through that process of buying a house. Having the construction background and just
Yeah, you can add a lot of value in a lot of areas during that buying process.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I know what's behind the drywall.
Yep.
And I know how much things cost and what it takes to fix them and so on and so forth. So I found myself to be a really good resource, and I just loved it. I mean, it was so nice. Nothing better than having that close relationship with someone for whether it's 2 months or 2 years, however long it takes to buy a house. And then you see them, a year later, and they just love the home, and they, start raising a family in it, and it's just so fulfilling within itself, and it just, love to do it. So
it's interesting when you talk about that. One thing I've really realized as I've gotten older is how important the kind of farming culture and work ethic is, like, to the area. And growing up, I grew up in Eden.
Sure.
So you just assume that's the way the world is, and you assume that every other house or every other piece of property is farmland.
Right.
And it's interesting. Like when I was in grade school, I would say half of the kids in the class came from farming families. And my dad talks about how when he was in grade school and went to grade school in the same town, he was the only one in school that was not part of a farming family.
Okay.
But it's just, that I think that, that work ethic and, going from, farming to an interest in electrical or mechanical things or fixing the combine or all the things that you need to do on the farm. It's interesting as you get into, other industries and other markets, how those skill sets just follow you as you go.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I mean, you just have to figure stuff out.
You have to. Yeah, that's exactly
there's
it.
There's no ifs, ands about it. There's, this doesn't work. How do we make it work?
Exactly.
Because you can't just say, oh, it doesn't work. We're not going to finish the day today. You have to make it happen. So
yeah, I remember I interviewed a kid, like, it was probably 5 years ago. It was for an assembly position on the shop floor, and he had just gotten done rebuilding the combine. At the entire combine, every nut and bolt, all the electrical.
Sure.
And you were, just, talking to this guy, and it's like he didn't even appreciate how much knowledge he had. And it was just really interesting to see that perspective, how you can learn really anything if you have to.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that I've worked, so I was an electrician up until 6 or 7 years ago now. So I did real estate while I was as an electrician.
Pulling double duty.
So yeah, I did that for 15 years, and I actually worked in Milwaukee for 10 years.
Okay.
And you talk about the farming community in the background, and nothing against Milwaukee people, but you get kids that are off the street. They're 20 years old. They don't know what a drill is, how to screw in a screw, which end of the hammer to use. It's pretty amazing. And now my 8-year-old son, obviously I have him help me at the rental properties. He does better than a lot of the kids that I worked with back then.
And that was one thing too I want to talk about, is just where you see the trades going. And I think I read something recently, for every 5 people retiring in the trades, there's only 2 people replacing them. And my dads and my uncles, and they had been, I've been hearing for 20 years that there's a shortage of people in the trades, and clearly that's accelerating. And when you look at the average age of somebody in the trades, it's they're a little bit on the older side at times.
Yeah.
So what do you think that whether home builders or industrial contractors, commercial contractors, what do you think can be done to kind of reverse that trend?
Well, it's the question of the day, right? It's really hard to get people interested in that. I mean, it's...
Why do you think that is?
Well, it's people younger than me. I'm 40 now, so I wasn't necessarily in the generation of just the technology and all that stuff. But I think that's part of it. I mean, people are they do everything from behind a computer or tablet or whatever the case may be. So they have no interest in getting dirty and working in that sort of environment. And that's honestly the reason I got out of it, just because you're working in the cold all day, you're I mean, the pay is great, but it's,
It's
not
hard work.
enjoyable. It's
Yeah.
really hard work.
Yeah.
And there's great opportunity to, if you're going to be a job foreman or something like that, where you don't have to do
Sure.
that type of stuff, but someone has to. So, it's inevitable that the pay is just going to continue to
Absolutely.
increase, and at some point, it's going to get to a point where, hey, I can make
It's going to attract more
I can
supply.
make $100,000 a year as an electrician,
Yep.
as opposed to sitting behind a computer all day making 50. I mean, that's going to play a big part of it.
Yep.
And some people, depending on what they want to do, can make that work. So it's, I think it's just the money factor, and prices are just going to continue to rise for
Yeah.
those types of people. You do still have, there's some good programs with some of the schools, like Fond du Lac High School. They have I forget what it's called, their program there, that they have the trades that they're
Sure.
trying to get people to do that, which is really good, but you have to still want it. I mean, whether they take it in high school and can move on, that's great. But I mean, it's still, the reason I got into it is because I never went to college. I just went right into that. So I had no student loans, and I was making money right away. Like I said,
Yep.
I bought a house at 19 and bought my first rental at 23 or 24 or something like that. And what a great way to, accumulate stuff starting early.
For sure.
But for someone that has to, go to college for 4 years, and you have that student loan, and then you got to,
Yeah, you get a late start.
yeah, it's much more difficult. So
Yeah.
if we can, some of these, and that's kind of the way that some of these employers are pushing people,
Yeah.
is to say, hey, you can, jump ahead, almost 8 years, because you're going to be so much further ahead by going into this. And then you still have the opportunity to start your own business. I mean, you could, get a van and become a contractor of any sort, if that's the type of work you like to do, or just find the right people. So, yeah, I mean, there's no short answer to it other than.
So it's a lot of, the market will adjust from a compensation standpoint, attract more people. That makes a lot of sense. I think the other thing too is that I think there has to be a shift back towards really appreciating those skill sets.
Yeah.
I think for so many decades, people were pushed to go to college because you were convinced, somebody convinced you that was the right thing to do, and you almost felt bad in some cases about not going to college.
Right.
And it's just there's been a loss of focus on how important those those types of positions are. Could be electrician, mechanical contractors, welders, machinists, press brake operators, just all the stuff that happens in the background to really keep the world moving. I feel like people need to appreciate that a lot more. And even if the money adjustments happen, if there's not an appreciation for who builds things around us, I don't think the money's going to take care of it all.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, you have to have kids that,
There's pride to get into it.
Yeah, I have a 8 and 11-year-old, and my daughter. You always ask them what they want to be. My daughter wants to be a teacher. They see the teachers, they like the idea of that, and my son wanted to be a garbage truck driver because he sees the guy.
That's funny.
So it's interesting, the perception of kids as to what they see that they should do. But now my daughter wants to be a doctor, so obviously that requires college, and she doesn't understand what it's going to take and what it's like. So, I think it's, it goes back to the school system as well as to how they portray.
Exactly. It's as much of a marketing issue as it is anything else.
Yeah.
And it's at the school level, but just culture and society. And, and I think there are, and I talked about this with Joe when he was on too. There are companies out there, large companies, that I think are trying to shift that narrative. You look at SpaceX, Tesla, some of these other, these large engineering manufacturing companies that are really doing a much better job of building things cool again. And I think that, we try to do that obviously in a much smaller scale. But when we design something, when we engineer something, when we make it, we want our brand on it. We want a certain amount of pride that comes from, when a sports field fires up for the first time. It doesn't matter if it's sales, marketing, engineering, manufacturing, accounting, purchasing. Everybody's taking credit for that.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas I think in a specialized economy where part makers sell to the sub-assembly makers who sell to the part makers who at some point along the line it gets turned into a product. I think that just gets lost, and
Right.
people lose that kind of pride factor. So, yeah, I think the narrative is shifting, but I think that's an important component.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, there's nothing like turning those lights on for
Yeah.
the first time when you're working on a project, and
Yep.
you know all the work that went into it, how much it took, and you
All
turn
the
that breaker on.
wire you pulled through,
Yeah,
all the studs and the 2x4.
Yeah, the breaker didn't trip when you turned it on for the first time.
Yeah.
That's always a good sign. So
Well, another interesting aspect of kind of home building and construction, I remember probably about a decade ago, where you realize where contractors are manufacturing in the field, and everything is always one of one. Where in manufacturing, you try and produce repeatability and scale to drive costs down and increase efficiencies. And it's the contractor world it's a difficult one because if you're a home builder, you have a spec that you can repeat over time, but there's just a lot of improvising and decision making, and I think that's another thing where I think those professions are going to be great professions for the long term because you cannot automate away that stuff.
right.
You can, I know like Boston Dynamics, they're trying to make, construction robots where they can, move materials and things around on site. But if you're remodeling a 100-year-old house, you never know what you're going to encounter when you rip up a wall.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you can, have panelized homes and
Yeah.
things of that nature. And even on some big commercial projects,
Sure.
I found it interesting. There's a couple local contractors that are utilizing pre-built stuff. So they'll have, the box connected to the conduit, and they, pre-ship it, put the panel together.
Sure.
And then they'll just connect it in the field.
Yeah, Faith Technologies does.
Yeah,
does
exactly.
That.
Yep. I think Pieper Electric does as
Yep.
well. So I always, so I was the city of Fond du Lac electrical inspector for 5 years. So I got to see a lot of
nice.
this stuff that, I never did just working for the company that
Sure.
I did. So it was always interesting to me. I don't think I would have liked doing that if I was in the field being the installer. I'm like, oh, I got to find this piece. I just want to put it together myself because I know how it is, and, you have a lot less waste.
Sure.
But, if you can pay someone $8 an hour in an enclosed environment to put it together, as opposed to the electrician $80 an hour, maybe it works. They claimed it did. I asked them all the time, like, is this worth it? He's like, oh yeah. I'm like, okay.
And I think there's going to be a lot more of that. And our building across the street used to be like a manufactured homes building.
Oh, really?
So I think
Okay.
it was Stern.
Oh,
some,
sure.
And
Yeah.
that moved to I think Chilton. But I think there's going to be a lot more of that. There's a company called Boxed that's they're making, more or less a pre-built home that ships on a semi-trailer, and you can unfold it and, put it together in the field. So I think there's more and more of that's going to happen. I'm curious from a regulation standpoint, with local building codes and licensing, and how much do you think that will slow down some of the standardization and scalability of what could happen in a manufacturing environment?
Well, that's the biggest issue.
Yeah.
Is you have so many municipal codes against pre-built
Yeah.
homes, and the building codes are so unique.
Sure.
That as much as they try to standardize them, there's still certain nuances within certain municipalities. Every inspector has their certain kind of thing. So short of a actual, a mobile home that's a complete separate entity in and of itself, that's got a stamp on it that is, has nothing to do with the building code, everything else needs to comply, and it's difficult to standardize that and make it work for different locations, different environments, different wind loads, just all kinds of different factors. And then by the time you save money on the front end, and then do you end up with a better product that's more valuable that someone's going to want to purchase? That's the thing. It's like, yeah, it'll be affordable, but who's going to, does someone want to pay for a 800 square foot house on a tiny little lot? And what's that cost going to be? Is it going to be $175,000? Maybe
Yeah.
you buy a $50,000 or a 50-year-old house for the same price that's bigger, and you upgrade it just because it's more traditional. And that's another thing that a lot of people don't realize. When you remodel something like that, when they're pre-built, you have a lot of different challenges. So if you wanted to add on or just remodel something inside, the construction is so much different that it makes it so much more of a challenge to do that. So I've found a lot of buyers that are hesitant to
Sure.
purchase something like that. That are, they're very nice homes. Wausau Homes has a really nice.
Oh, that's right.
Nice product, but there's still, you have that beam down the middle, and if you wanted to finish the basement, you got to hide that somehow, and you can't get any mechanicals through there, so you're going around it. So I don't know. I try to keep an open mind to that stuff, but
it's never easy.
No,
that type of transition.
It's not.
Yeah.
And
well, the old so the I know one of the more popular older house layouts in Fond du Lac is it a Fond du Lac Square?
Yep.
And wasn't that a Sears catalog order after World War II?
I honestly don't know what the history of it is.
Yeah, I know. So after World War II, I know Sears had all of these. They weren't pre-built, but more or less pre-spec, pre-configured. And I think the Fond du Lac Square was a Sears order.
Okay, that's interesting.
It's just kind of interesting how things do come back,
right?
Full circle at some point.
Well, and I mean, as you probably know too, there's a bunch of homes that were built in the 60s, 70s. They were after the war. All these people just came and had needed jobs, and they just created all these ranch homes that were almost identical. I used to live on Sterling Drive, and you could look down the block, and you can almost tell that all the houses were almost exactly the same, just with some different changes. So very interesting as to how some of that goes.
Sure, absolutely. So what was the COVID era like in terms of real estate and home building versus, because versus other economic downturns? It was interesting where the previous recession was largely driven from issues in real estate and home loans and things like that. And you'd mentioned the recession back in the early 2000s. This one was completely different when it came to real estate and home building, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So this was very much inventory driven, just very little inventory, still a lot of demand. So I'll talk about real estate first. I was in real estate a lot longer than I was in home building. So when no one knew what was going to happen when COVID hit, right? Suddenly, we can't go out. Are you an essential service? all this stuff, like
all the chaos.
And I'm like, well, I'm just going to keep doing what I do until someone says I can't. That's just kind of the way I do things.
Yep.
I'll remember, I'm like, well, can I still show houses? I can't sell a house virtually, right?
For sure. Yeah.
You got to get a feel for it. So I still showed houses. I did what I could, took any precaution. But there was just, people were stuck at home so much that they realized that they didn't like their house anymore. I mean, that was it. So what do you do? You're like, God, I hate this place. I'm going to look at other houses. And interest rates were extremely low, so they just had time to really look into that. So I think, that was a big factor for the demand for homes.
And people were spending less money in other areas.
Correct.
So there was more income to allocate towards remodeling and that type of thing.
And then also, suddenly when you're working from home, you need more space. You need that home office. You maybe need 2 home offices. And then kids weren't going to school, so you needed a playroom or makeshift.
Spending a lot more time with the family. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So that was a big factor. And, the stimulus, really drove a lot of it. I mean, a lot of people didn't just throw the money away. They were like, well, here's the money. I'm still working. I'm still getting a paycheck. Now suddenly I have extra down payment. So suddenly, and with the interest rates as low as they were, suddenly the person that, could, typically afford a $200,000 mortgage payment, suddenly a $300,000 mortgage payment was not unattainable at those interest rates, at 2.8% or whatever we got down to. So that's what everybody looks at. They look at their payment. They're like, oh, I can afford this, So then suddenly the price goes up and up. So in those ranges, so anything above 200,000, probably all the way up to 400,000, you just had a lot more demand than you ever would before. First-time home buyers were buying $300,000 homes because they're used to paying $1,000 a month for rent. So you take that gets you a pretty good mortgage payment if you're used to that payment. So just a lot of those factors played into that. As far as home building, I'll be honest, I bought into it just as, COVID was starting. I'm like, oh God, is this the right thing to do? I'm like, no one had any idea, but I already committed to it, and when I commit to something, I'm gonna move forward with it. So I'm like, well, we'll hope for the best, and it was just
Well, they're very
crazy.
related. You have a spike in demand,
Yeah,
which is going to affect existing inventory, and then you have a way to produce more inventory via the home building.
Right.
And I'm sure the challenge there is, everything just is so connected where then all the supply houses run out of parts to actually build the houses.
Right.
So it's just I think that's what's interesting, where never has the word supply chain been talked about so much at family gatherings.
right. Yeah.
So everybody's got this lesson in supply chain and logistics and, the last 2 years. And it's just, I think that, if there is a positive in all of this, and there's always positives, I think people are absolutely more aware of how interconnected everything is,
Right.
and how important, local manufacturing is, and local relationships. And, I think that is one of the positive things that will come from this. So.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
Yeah, but I guess then home building, how has that been the last 12 months?
It's been still challenging
Yeah.
trying to get people to understand where the prices are going.
Sure.
If I've been working with some people for a couple of years where I'll send them the pricing. I'm like, well, here's where it is today,
Yeah.
and you try to be as upfront and
Sure.
accurate as you possibly can. But as you know, the material prices are so unpredictable.
Changes day to day.
Yeah. So you're like, well, here's your price today. This is what we have. If you come back to me in a month, I can't guarantee that price.
Yeah.
I can hold it for a week maybe and hope for the best. But you also have some people that are thinking prices are going to come down, and I don't see it happening anytime soon, short
No.
of any crazy disaster.
Yeah, if they come down, there's going to be a lot bigger issues that we're all
Right.
dealing with, because that means that, you can't ramp up the supply of parts overnight.
Right.
You have to retool factories. You have to build more factories, which requires parts to build those factories. So if suddenly there's a big oversupply, it means demand has
Right.
crashed.
Yep. And we talked about it before.
Yeah.
We're looking at labor
Yeah.
shortages too, and I don't think the labor costs have caught up yet to what they could be charging. I mean,
Yep.
they hopefully none of my subcontractors are listening, but it's only a matter of time before that stuff just keeps going up, because and once again we need people to do it, and
For sure.
to get people in it.
Yeah, that's a problem that takes decades to
Right.
to fix. So we're putting in a new building, and working with Keller Builders.
Sure.
They've been great to work with, and we weren't exactly sure on the timing of everything, and we do a lot of steel and aluminum production for light poles and other parts and things like that. And we got 9 price increases last year on steel and aluminum raw materials. And at the same time, we were designing this building and trying to make a commitment to the building company and the contractor. And man, things week to week, or suddenly Keller would come back, and they were nice. They're passing through costs. At least that's what they said they were doing. And it's like up another. It was a good chunk of change.
Sure.
So having locking that in, and hoping that you're hedging against further raw material increases. You're not getting locked in at some rate where all of a sudden things go back down.
Right.
It's just, there's a lot of uncertainty in the residential side and the industrial side.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing we do at Winfield Homes is we actually lock in the price. We don't build any clauses,
Oh, nice.
Because we'll actually order everything right away. We'll commit to our suppliers and say, hey, we're building this house. We need you to honor this price for us. So we don't build in any, increases or anything like that. And I know a lot of, companies were, and they had to.
Cushion,
I mean,
right?
Yeah, when you don't know what you're going to get stuff for. So
Yeah.
especially when you're not going to start for a while, it's easier to do on the residential side than commercial side, obviously.
Yeah, and that's where you talk about costs continuing to go up, or labor costs, raw material costs. One thing that's happened, I think, the last 12 to 18 months is the end users or the owners have not seen nearly as much of a price increase, because the supply chain is absorbing so much of these impacts.
Right.
So even if, from a sales standpoint, if they're increasing, profitability and margin and everything else continues to be a major challenge for everybody.
Oh,
So
definitely.
the company's making the parts or the raw materials, they're eating a little bit, and then the next person is, and the next person is, and it's just eventually, reality is reality, and everybody has to adjust. And I completely agree. I don't think that has fully happened yet.
Yeah, no, it's a matter of time.
Yep. Well, cool, man. Anything else you want to talk about, or Fond du Lac related, or real estate, home building?
Well, I love the ledge games you guys do.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's
Did you compete this year?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I competed the last 3 or 4 years, I think.
Nice.
And so it was pretty fun. Love getting out there and being competitive. I'm competitive no matter what I do. So
throwing some axes around and shooting some arrows. Yeah, that's a great event. That's everybody looks forward to that. Fall time frame. It's it's nice time in Wisconsin.
Yeah,
it's before it gets too cold, and like it has been the last week, man. It's been pretty cold, but yeah, it's been great. More you guys want to get involved with that, with that event, just talk to Becca.
Yeah, no, it's great that you guys do that, and I think it's just one of the small examples that we have in this area that for people that aren't familiar with it, you have to kind of just pay attention, keep your eyes open to these things. So I think it's.
Are you saying we need to market it better?
No, no, I'm saying other events need. YPF could even, or
I like it.
Do something to get involved with that somehow. I think it'd be really cool.
For sure.
But it's, I just think there's, Fond du Lac in general. We still need to keep working to have more attraction for young people and getting them to want to be here.
For the long term, right?
Yeah. I think we have so much potential in the community with Keycafer Park. I mean, we have really nice bike trails, great golf courses. We have the lake. I don't even use the lake, and it's still
You're too busy.
Cool to have. Yeah. So yeah, I think we just need to try to keep an open mind a little bit more, and embrace
Absolutely.
what we have, because we have something really cool. I mean, great people.
Yep.
Your company is so cool just to have an atmosphere like this. We just had a presentation from Excel Engineering.
Oh yeah,
and
they're a great local firm too.
Yeah, big time. I mean, just huge addition, and super cool people, and just all local, and they wanted to commit to this. I mean, we need to work with those types of companies to keep them happy, and
reinvest, right? At every level.
Yeah, and show them that we appreciate what they do, because they do a lot. So,
Absolutely.
So that's.
Well, man, thanks for all you do as well. Thanks for stopping
welcome.
by.
Yeah,
we'll talk soon.
All right.
Let me guess.